The Notes of Helen Schuckman, A Course in Miracles. Reading from the Notes of Helen Schuckman, A Course in Miracles. All right. Bill's very proper emphasis on changing your mind needs further clarification. Whatever is true and real is eternal and cannot change or be changed. The soul is therefore unalterable because it is already perfect, but the mind can elect the level it chooses to serve. The only limit which is put on its choice is that it cannot serve two masters. While the ballot itself is a secret one and the right to vote is fully protected, voting always entails both election and rejection. If two candidates are voted for the same position, the machine cancels the ballot automatically. All right. So reading from the Notes of Helen Schuckman, A Course in Miracles, the text, changing your mind needs further clarification. I don't think that little part there is in the CE version by Robert Perry. It might be, but as far as changing your mind, you can. So ACIM, you can change your mind. You can't change your mind by changing your behavior, but you can change your mind. So in the moment, I can change my mind and think differently. Don't think along the same ego way that I'm used to thinking. In ACIM terms, thinking along an ego way, which is something that could result in remorse, disappointment, sorrow. Not thinking along that way, literally, change my mind, your mind, anyone's mind, change our mind in the moment to think differently about the situation, whatever it is, whatever the problem is, whatever the concern is, think differently about it. It can be done, changing your mind. So that's the idea to me in ACIM, A Course in Miracles. Change your mind in the moment, literally. Think differently than the normal way I would be thinking about any subject. ACIM, whatever is true and real is eternal and cannot change or be changed. The soul is therefore unalterable because it is already perfect. So the ACIM idea and truth that everyone is an eternal, perfect child of God, created by God, eternal, perfect in every way, Jesus-like in every way, the Christ mind, that's what everyone has at all times, moment to moment. That's your capital S self in ACIM, your Christ self, etc., etc. So our perfect self is always there, and it's eternal in terms of perfect joy, perfect peace, perfect freedom, perfect love, perfect goodness, all the perfect positive attributes with zero negative emotions involved in anything in any way. So that's what being eternal is as a human being. But the mind can elect the level it chooses to serve. The only limit which is put on its choice is that it cannot serve two masters. So a mind, ACIM ideas about a mind can give birth to ideas that are not the will of God. So from a young age, I fathered beliefs that are not the will of God. I made beliefs that are not the will of God. They're not perfect peace, joy, strength from a young age through the early years, preteens, teens, 20s, whenever, 30s. I created beliefs. Thoughts were thunk that created beliefs that were not the perfect will of God. We're not perfect joy, peace, strength, goodness, regardless of what those thoughts are about. And that's not the will of God. That's ego mind, in terms of what ACIM is saying. So any beliefs that are not perfect joy, peace, strength, etc., are ego beliefs that I made, and then they can be undone or transformed. That type of energy can be transformed into the God mind, which is always present. Our capital S self, our God mind, is always there. The blocks to its awareness, or the blocks to love's awareness, the blocks to the awareness of the God mind, is any beliefs that are not perfect joy, peace, strength. Um, so uh, ACIM here, the only limit which is put on its choice is that it cannot serve two masters. So every moment, every second, ACIM has a sense in the book about every moment, every second, you're deciding between ego mentality and God mentality. You're deciding between, joy, peace, strength, goodness, God mentality, or you're deciding on ego mentality, that which is not supremely happy, perfect peace, perfect joy. There's only two ways to go, moment to moment, either the God mind or the ego mind. ACIM. While the ballot itself is a secret one and the right to vote is fully protected, voting always entails election and rejection. If two candidates are voted for the same position, the machine cancels the ballot automatically. This might be in Robert Perry's book, the CE version, but again, ACM uses a lot of different ideas to put forth the idea that you're either living in the perfect God mind or the ego mind, and it uses a lot of different types of ways of saying that. So this is just another one of saying that. So it is always about the election of the God mind and the rejection of the ego mind, moment to moment. As long as there's an ego mind present, as long as I can even think something that would not be perfect peace, joy, strength, and have the option to physically act on it, as long as I have that option in my mind, then the ego mentality has to be rejected. The book talks about vigilance of mind in terms of vigilant for the God mind, senses like that. But um, when, so Jesus in his public mission, he was no longer thinking anything that was not the will of God. So he didn't have the option to do anything that was not the will of God because he couldn't even think it. So if you can't think it, you can't do it. I still don't think that sentence is in A Course in Miracles verbatim. If you can't think it, you can't do it. It, it I would believe that sentence is somewhere, because to me that really makes sense. That um, I don't want to think. I don't even want to think anything that's ego, that's less than supremely happy, perfect peace, perfect joy. I don't even want to think it, and I should be able to get my mind to the point where I can't even think it. I mean, as far as that topic goes, there's a lot in ACIM about um, the only thoughts you will remember from your past are loving thoughts, that which was truly the will of God in terms of joy, peace, strength, goodness. That's the only thing that's remembered in terms of the past. Everything else is forgotten. And how do I get there? By forgiving myself for everything that was not joy, peace, strength. I forgive myself for everything that was not joy, peace, strength, fully, forgive myself fully for that. And then I won't remember those things which were not joy, peace, strength. That's definitely an idea in the book. Um, so um, this little part here about, if two candidates are, so if you're thinking both the God thought and the ego thought about any given subject, they cancel each other out. Um, well, I suppose, you need do nothing. So you need do nothing in ACIM means physically you need do nothing. So you do need to do a lot in terms of mental change, but in terms of physically doing something, you need do nothing. So um, if I don't do that which is an ego thing and bring myself remorse, then I've chosen the God mind. As far as having both the God mind thought and the ego thought about something and canceling them out, I don't know. I don't know. That might have, anyway. ACIM, A Course in Miracles, Notes of Helen Schuckman. That's what I'm reading from. This is necessary because a split vote does not represent any real allegiance. Well, certainly the book talks about not pursuing double purposes, and double purposes insanely sought is an expression in A Course in Miracles. And what it means is I go to something that's ego, I cause myself remorse. Then I go to something that's the God mind, I cause, and then I'm in joy, peace, strength. And then I go back and forth, back and forth. That's not allegiance. Um, allegiance has to be always, moment to moment. Only the God thought about any subject there is. Um, you know, um, the God thought about it, where every moment, moment to moment, is nothing but peace, joy, strength, and all the other positive attributes, tenderness, kindness, etc., etc. Free will is the attribute of the mind, not the soul. Reading from A Course in Miracles, the Notes of Helen Schuckman, the soul always remains changeless because it never leaves the sight of God. So free will. So um, I have to be 100% free willing to live the will of God. If I have any resistance to the actual will of God, where, on any given subject that humans deal with, um, if I'm resistant to the truth about that subject, it will not come to me. I will not physically do it, or I'll go back and forth on it. But free will has to be completely given to the truth about any given thing in any given moment, and it has to be done happily. If I'm not happy about it, um, if I'm not happy about the real truth, I'm not going to do it. So I have to be happy about the real truth, whatever the real truth is, the will of God for anything, physical behavior, spiritual beliefs, anything. I have to, free will, allow the Holy Spirit to, uh, you know, give me the truth about anything that I'm doing, moment to moment, in terms of peace, joy, strength, and then live it, act on it, live it, and not the ego way of doing things, which would lead to remorse, doubt, fear, confusion, sorrow, disappointment, etc. So, and it said here, not the soul, meaning that our soul or spirit is always perfect. That's always present. It's always there. We just have to remove everything that's ego mentality, and then there's nothing there but your soul or spirit, similar to how Jesus was living after his baptism. So the soul always remains changeless because it never leaves the sight of God. Yes, so everything is about oneness with God. Um, similar to God himself. God is the first person of the Trinity who knows of himself as an individual being, a spirit being, formless spirit being, but a spirit being. And so God himself, we are the children of God, and it's up to us to choose to be like him. Think like God is an idea in this book, quite a few places, and it's that idea that, thinking as far as only that which brings peace, joy, strength, love, goodness, supremely happy, and zero negative emotions in any way. That's how God thinks. That's how I think, you think, in our capital S selves, our Christ mind, our Christ-like self, and um, uh, and then we are a part of God in that sense. We are individual mind spirits, but we are similar to God in terms of living in perfect peace, joy, strength. Again, similar to Jesus after his baptism. Um, so reading from the Notes of Helen Schuckman, A Course in Miracles. The creation of the soul is already fully accomplished. The mind, if it votes to do so, becomes a medium by which the soul can create along the line of its own creation. If it does not freely elect to do so, it retains this creative ability, but places itself under tyrannus rather than authoritative control. As a result, what it creates is imprisonment, because such are the dictates of tyrants. I think this is in Robert Perry's book, right? I know it is. I'm very certain this is in Robert Perry's book. Maybe not in the FIP, but again, the same message. The creation of the soul is already fully accomplished. So my perfect self is there. The ACIM describes it as at the center of our minds. That's how ACIM describes the God mind, is at the center of our minds, and that's where we need to live in terms of our thought. And everything that's not The God mind, ego mind, has to be transformed into God mind or undone into God mind. That mental energy, that ego mental energy has to be undone into God mind. Is ideas in ACIM. The mind, if it votes to do so, becomes a medium by which the soul can create along the line of its own creation. Again, live in the perfect Jesus-like God mind, moment to moment, perfect peace, joy, strength, zero negative emotions, moment to moment. If it does not freely elect to do so, it retains this creative ability, but places itself under tyrannus rather than authoritative control. So the ego is tyrannus. As far as ego beliefs that are not the perfect will of God, therefore they're not supremely happy, perfect peace, joy, strength. They are filled with those negative emotions. That's what makes them tyrannus. Authoritative control would be living perfectly in the God mind, allowing God to be the authority of my mind would be one way of saying that. So even if you are in ego mentality and you're creating for yourself remorse, sorrow, disappointment, or any other negative emotion, confusion, doubt, any of it, even if you're doing so, the God mind is still present if I elect to go to the God mind instead of the ego mind for any subject that anyone's dealing with in any given moment. As a result, what it creates is imprisonment, because such are the dictates of tyrants. The ego mentality is imprisoning yourself. That's a topic in this book in quite a few places. I'll say the whole idea about that. Um, anything that's not supremely happy, perfect peace, perfect joy, anything that is remorse, sorrow, disappointment, or any other negative emotion is imprisonment in terms of a human being living their life. So that's how the ego is, or that's what the ego does. All right, reading from ACIM, A Course in Miracles. To change your mind means to place it at the disposal of true authority. The miracle is thus a sign that the mind has elected to be guided by Christ in his service. The word his is in capital letters. The abundance of Christ is the natural result of choosing to follow him. True authority. Called true authority, God himself, the communication link, the capital I interpreter. All these terms are used in ACIM, which are basically describing the same thing in the sense of spirit forces that are there to help humans perfect, in terms of spirit perfection. Jesus of Nazareth, the Holy Spirit, true authority. Any of those ideas that anyone likes, they're more or less all the same thing. The miracle is thus a sign that the mind has elected to be guided by Christ in his service. So, miracles, anything that's filled with joy, peace, strength, goodness, it's a sign that the mind is elected to be guided by Christ in his service. The mind is elected to be guided by the Holy Spirit, Jesus of Nazareth. Any of those spiritual forces are doing the same thing. However anybody relates to those spiritual forces is good, fine. In the service of God himself, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, in service to others, the Christ of everyone else, every human being alive, the service of the spirit mind in everyone in any given moment, man or angel. The abundance of Christ is the natural result of choosing to follow him. Follow the God-led feelings, thoughts, beliefs leading to words and actions. The reason so reading from A Course in Miracles, the Notes of Helen Schuckman, you have been late recently because you were taking dictation is merely because you didn't remember to ask. me when to stop. This is an example of the indiscriminate or uncontrolled miracle working we already spoke of. It is well meant but ill advised. Sounds very personal to Helen Schuckman, probably not in the CE version by Robert Perry. I'll just continue reading here. ACIM, the notes of Helen Schuckman. I prompted that call from Jack to show you that this is not necessary. Also, the other man needed the money more today. Again, probably not in Robert Perry's CE version. ACIM, note that you managed to fill your scribal role with no interruptions and were also on time. Note also that you closed the book and put it aside without consulting me. Ask, is that all? Question mark. I mean, in every moment, moment to moment, we should be consulting the Holy Spirit until we're living fully in the Holy Spirit. Similar to Jesus and his public mission, there's a sentence in the book about the Holy Spirit's purpose is to bring you to perfection so that the Holy Spirit is no longer needed. I'm paraphrasing a little there, but that's the idea that the Holy Spirit wants to bring someone to Jesus-like perfection, similar to Jesus at his public mission. And then you don't need to ask per se, or things of that nature, because you're fully living the will of God every moment, moment to moment. That's the goal. So, reading from ACIM, the notes of Helen Schuckman. No, add the following. These notes are serving, among other things, to replace the handwriting on the wall which you once saw next to your own altar, which read, "You have been weighed in the balance and found wanting." Just very personal to Helen, probably not in Robert Perry's CE version. Scribes must learn Christ control to replace their former habits, which did produce scarcity in place of abundance. From errors of this kind, the sense of deprivation is inevitable, but very easily corrected. It sounds like it is in the book. Scribes must learn Christ control. Well, everyone must learn Christ control to replace their former habits. I think the book says something like miracles, Jesus, first person Jesus, he wants to control miracles in an impersonal way, for everyone at all times, in terms of joy, peace, strength, whatever the thought, word, or action might be, versus Christ guidance. In the book, it definitely talks about this topic: Christ guidance, Christ control. But in any event, what I'm reading here, scribes must learn Christ control to replace their former habits, which did produce scarcity in place of abundance. So, I mean, there's a sentence in the book. It says, I mean, the goal is to not even be able to think something mentally that would be ego, that would bring remorse, disappointment, sorrow, or any other negative emotion. That's the goal. And along the same lines, I think around that point in the book, it says, although I'm not saying that self-control is not good. In other words, self-control is also good. The letter, following the letter of the law, if you or anyone is not capable of following the spirit of the law in terms of doing the right thing from a place of peace, joy, strength, and understanding, follow the letter of the law. Don't do it regardless, whatever it might be, thought, word, or action. self-control. So, self-control. So as far as bad habits are concerned, self-control is a good thing. There's a sentence in the book about that. Um, so, scarcity, producing scarcity would be anything about the ego where, in ego mentality, any thought, word, or action leading to remorse, disappointment, sorrow, that would be scarcity. That would be living in scarcity in place of abundance, living in the God mind, peace, patience, kindness, tenderness, the ability to observe, um, uh, joy, peace, strength, abundance. From errors of this kind, the sense of deprivation is inevitable, but very easily corrected. Um, debate, so live, not debating, living with the ego mentality of uh, experiencing remorse, disappointment, sorrow, um, goes along with feeling deprived of something I want. Deprivation. It's not a good thing. It's not peace, joy, strength, but I want it anyway. It's a bad habit in terms of where it said there about their former habits. So I want it anyway. I'm going to do it anyway, even though I know it's not perfect peace, joy, strength. That would be deprivation, feelings of deprivation. Um, so, so it's easily corrected in terms of understand what the truth is about any given situation, moment. There's a sentence in the book goes like the Holy Spirit uh, acknowledges, looks to only what is true in your mind and then extends that to others. I'm paraphrasing some there, but it's the idea that there is a real truth for everything. The mind can be right or wrong. Physical behavior, spiritual beliefs, there's a right and a wrong for everything, absolutely everything. And if I live in the right, I'm going to feel joy, peace, strength, goodness, love. If I live in the wrong about anything, I'm going to experience remorse, disappointment, sorrow, confusion, anxiety, some negative emotion to some degree. So, so the correction is simply understand what is true about anything, physical behavior, spiritual beliefs, understand what is true about it and live it and happily, live it happily. And the ego mentality is easily corrected to the God mentality. Now look at the book review, which you said you would do. We had this all through lunch. I'm reading from ACIM, The Notes of Helen, Schuckman, text. I still don't see why this kind of adjustment is inherently less risky than rotation. None of this is, sounds personal to Helen. It's not part of the book.